Hi again, and welcome to another episode of the Government Transformation Show, the podcast for public sector changemakers. Joining me today for conversation is Eva Murray, who is lead evangelist at the data technology experts Snowflake. We're going to be exploring ideas around cross-government collaboration and how projects and departments can work together to unlock new ideas, new insights, and new ways of delivering services across different agencies to deliver better outcomes for citizens. Eva's going to explain how, yes, it's partly about technology, but even more so, it's about people, empowering teams with knowledge, understanding, and empowering them to try new things and try new ways of working, all of which can unlock the incredible power of data in the public sector. Really big topic and lots to get into, so let's jump into that conversation right now. So, Eva, welcome to the Government Transformation Show. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Tim.
Absolutely, our pleasure, our pleasure. And we're going to get into some of the big meaty topics around government collaboration, cross-government functions, and some really interesting aspects of an area that seems to be expanding, and really keen to get yours and Snowflake's views on that. But let's start at the beginning. So maybe you could just introduce yourself to our audience and just tell them a bit about your role with Snowflake and how you're working with the public sector in particular.
Absolutely. My role is as lead evangelist for the EMEA region, and that means I get to speak to a really diverse range of audiences all across EMEA and connect with our existing customers, our prospects, our partners, and help them figure out some of the challenges they might have with data and the questions they want to solve. So how can we get more business value out of the data? How can we get our people excited about data? How can we help them become more data literate? It's those kind of questions to really bring the people to the data, make them fall in love with the technology and see the potential of what they can do with it. And that translates, yes, into business value, but also hopefully better customer experiences and better employee experiences as well.
Fab. And, the rise of data, not just in government and public sector, but everywhere, it's this kind of unstoppable force now. So interesting that, and I think we'll get into some of this, is that how you kind of get everybody on board with that, because as you say, not necessarily on face value everybody's favorite topic, but at the same time, it's going to be so important to the way everybody works, the way organizations work, the way we deliver value. So looking forward to drilling into that summer stuff. So we said at the beginning that, Snowflake is a data company, but at the same time, there's more to it than that. And you're joining us at the Government Transformation Summit and hosting a table around cross-government functions. And this is a really interesting emerging theme, this idea that government can't exist in silos. You think about the sort of big beasts of Whitehall and never shall they mix, but increasingly there's this opportunity to collaborate, there's this opportunity to build across departments, to collaborate on projects, layer up data, all this sort of stuff. So like to start to drill into some of that stuff. So why does this cross-government collaboration piece matter to you, to Snowflake, and I guess to everybody?
Well, for me, it's because I've seen the potential of collaboration, what an impact it can have. So how much it can transform an organization and the people within it. There is so much value in coming together around data, but also as people. And it's about finding new insights, figuring out solutions to a problem together. But all of that is underpinned by learning from each other. So when you bring different people into the room, they can be data experts, subject matter experts, they can be, finance experts, legal experts, just all of these different brains, and throw them to a problem. They teach each other in the process of actually figuring out the solution. And the more input you have from those different perspectives, and when we look at government, different people covering what citizens need, what communities need, what the economy needs, what the healthcare sector needs, bringing all those people together then means that the solution probably has considered more of those inputs and will probably serve the outcome will serve people better. And it's not just a pinpoint solution that is great for one part, but really atrocious for another part of society. So that is, for me, the thinking behind it. It's really, how can we pool our resources? I think we often underestimate as people or as humans just how brilliant we can be, and especially when we sit down together and putting kind of politics and differences aside and just say, how actually, what is my best contribution and what is this other person's best contribution, and how can we pull that and create some really great outcomes. So from that perspective, that's, I think, what collaboration can provide and what it can offer to people. And then it makes business sense. It makes sense because it saves a lot of costs to not replicate all those efforts with technology, processes, and people in every single function and department, when you could combine your resources and actually achieve something much bigger. And quite often the data that one department needs, another one needs as well. So why have all of that, copied across, sitting in each one of their environments, instead of having it centralized and actually people drawing on one central version of the truth that people can reflect and reference.
Yeah, and I think increasingly, data might be the sort of gathering point or the focal point for different teams, different people, different individuals, different ideas. But it is just that it's the vehicle that's an enabler. And interesting that you're talking about the outcomes there. It's not data for data's sake. It's not technology for technology's sake. It's about, okay, is it improving operational efficiency internally, or is it even improving service delivery, service outcomes, for end users, for citizens? So really powerful. I suppose that's the sort of vision we want to get to, and I guess it's happening in some areas. But what's your take on the way government organizations currently collaborate beyond their walls, if you like? Are they doing a good job, or what's your sense?
Yeah, I would say there is a lot of collaborations already in place, and it might be shared objectives or campaigns that happen at a national level. I think COVID showed us great collaborations and the beginnings of some really new ideas of sharing data and how to improve things, and people really coming together because they had to, they were forced. There's always more that can be done. So I think the beginnings are there, and some areas are more advanced than others by the nature of it. So I think the healthcare sector already shares data. When you look at healthcare, pharmaceuticals, research, they already had to share data in some ways, but they also recognize how much more there can be done to really serve the patients and the wider public. And then other areas, not so much. So they can benefit from, okay, the technology is there. How can we use it to the maximum benefit? How can we come together? And recognizing one thing that I keep thinking about is, let's not try to move the data to the people, but the people to the data. Because if we're collaborating around data, people can go to the data as almost like a buffet rather than a sit down a la carte dinner. So, let them pick what they need to do their analyses, to get new insights, to whether it's in education, whether it's in social housing, whatever area it might be, and not forcing certain people in certain areas, but really letting them self-serve. Because quite often, in my experience, especially when people have worked in a sector for a very long time, they have a lot of ideas and they have thought for a long time about, wouldn't it be great if we could do A, B, and C? But it's not been possible because they haven't had the technologies or the tools or the processes. But if you open that up and if you say, what would you do if it was all possible? And you actually unleash them on that, people will probably feel very invigorated with the ideas they've already had and just try them out.
Yeah, and the healthcare example is an interesting one, because you can kind of see the logical persona of why you might join up these different parts of a patient journey, because it's all in that kind of healthcare sector. But what you're alluding to is, maybe let's take education and housing and benefits, and see what those layers can reveal in terms of insights, whether it's geospatial, socioeconomic data, and as you say, giving the people the chance to come up with those ideas, to say, okay, I'm going to go and talk to my colleagues at X department because I feel like they'll have a data set that can inform something that I'm doing on my project. It's hugely powerful. And I can, you can really start to see some transformational benefits coming through. And I guess it's happening, as you said, it's happening in some areas. Are there any sort of particular examples you can think of where you've seen this sort of successful cross-government collaboration? And then I suppose the kicker of that is, why do you think it worked?
Yeah, so I would say a really good example are ICSs, where you have those integrated care systems of healthcare providers and others like social services, housing, etc., who look after individuals but using their different perspectives. So it might be that a patient presents to a healthcare provider with a health problem, and once that's resolved, the issue still hasn't been fully addressed. And that might be because they live in a place, live in an apartment that is damp and moldy. So unless you fix the living environment, living conditions, they will always present with healthcare challenges. Maybe they have respiratory issues. So if you can then, as the healthcare provider, address the housing issue together with people from the housing department and say, hey, this needs to be fixed, maybe those healthcare challenges will resolve themselves or will improve dramatically at least. So it's those kind of situations. I was really impressed when I researched ICSs more into really what they're doing and read and watched some of those stories of people who suddenly just had somebody taking care of some of the challenges they were facing and that maybe they couldn't really fix themselves or they didn't know how to fix. And bringing together those essential services to support them is, in my mind, it feels like a no-brainer, and at the same time it feels revolutionary because it hasn't been done in that way before. And to me, that's my favorite example of collaboration, because you can immediately see the effect and everyone can really relate to that because we've seen those stories and maybe experienced them ourselves as well.
Yeah, that's a really powerful one. And I think you're right. It's a sort of historical weak spot in some of our sort of services. You know, you just discharge a vulnerable person from acute medical care in hospital, and then where's the handoff? Is it seamless? Are they being picked up? Are the issues that they have, you know, whether it's technology enabled assisted living, there's some really powerful use cases starting to emerge now. So yeah, so it's a really interesting one to pick up on. I want to talk something also about a topic that I know you have some pretty strong views around, which is how much of the kind of tech piece, should we say, is actually technology. It's a technical issue, and how much is a kind of cultural and people issue. Because I suspect, you know, Snowflake on the surface is a technology company, but at the same time, it's people you're dealing with. It's people that implement. It's people that work. So, where do you stand on that culture versus technology argument?
Yeah, it always comes back to people. And we have a fantastic technology that I truly believe in. That's why I joined the company. But unless you get people enthusiastic about it and interested and wanting to use the technology, they're not going to do it. You can buy the most advanced systems and implement them flawlessly and update everything. But if people aren't convinced, if they don't see the benefit for them, they're not going to use it. They're going to stick to their old methods because that's what they know, you know, it works, even if it doesn't work well, but it works for them. So for me, my approach has always been start the change management process really early on. So I'm a big proponent of finding champions internally, and typically people, whether they're data or technology leaders, they know who those champions are. They're the ones who put their hands up first for a project and who are interested, who show up and make their contributions, and involve those people early, even during the process of, you know, testing out a new technology, evaluating it. Give them a chance to get hands-on with the tools. And then once something is, you know, becoming in place, it's being implemented, involve them even more, and then they can actually help you with the rollout. So they can be the ones doing peer-to-peer teaching and learning and facilitating those conversations, convincing their colleagues how great it is. Because I'm sure we've all experienced it. When a manager tells you, oh, this is going to be the next best thing, people might just roll their eyes and say, oh yeah, whatever. But if your colleague says, this is going to make your life so much easier, it's going to save you hours every single week, and it's got a really nice user interface, it's going to be so fun to use, you're going to listen and you're going to at least test it out. And to support all of that, I would also encourage organizations to set up some activities or initiatives to really drive that adoption in a bit of a lighthearted way. So finding some projects people can sink their teeth into to say, hey, test it out with this, or, you know, maybe they have some really cool data sets for people to work on, or they have even a little bit of friendly competition, a bit of gamification to encourage people to test things, you know, gain some points, gain some badges. whatever suits that organization and their culture, but it has to be people first, because if you think about a technology that doesn't work, that isn't optimal for 2022, but everyone uses it, I'm sure we can all think of stuff that comes to mind. If people are really bought into it, they will continue using it. They will find ways to make it work. They are like water. They will find a way. But if you start with the technology and people aren't on board, it doesn't work. So I think people can make a lot of stuff work. We can patch things up and all that. But if the technology is great and the people aren't behind it, then it's probably doomed to fail. And then it's just going to be a matter of cobbling things together for a couple of years and then finding the new tool. So I would say invest heavily in terms of effort and a bit of sweat into making people enthusiastic. It's really about just lighting up their eyes with enthusiasm.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose as a follow-on from that kind of engagement and adoption piece and how you light that fire, there's then that question of how do you create the mindset that wants to collaborate both internally but also beyond an agency or an organization's own walls. How does an organization get better at that? Because again, there's a cultural piece there. If historically a department sort of has its walls closed and our data sets, you need to start sort of break that down. So any thoughts on how agencies and organizations get better at that collaboration piece?
A lot of it starts with trust. People need to feel confident that if they share their knowledge and their skills with others and work together on something, it's not going to cost them their job. They're not basically working themselves out of the job. Because I think that's a fear that a lot of people have is, oh, but if I work with someone else on this problem and I don't get the full credit for it, am I still relevant? So that needs to be fostered at from the top down to build that trust, to encourage people to collaborate and to showcase the outcomes of it. What I like to do, in those kind of community and collaborative settings is to get people, encourage them to work together on something, find something interesting in the data, and then share it with everyone else. Because as soon as you then share the work, it encourages others to share their work. And it shows, okay, this is what's possible. Oh, this is what they found from this data set. What did somebody else find? And it builds transparency, and it just makes people a bit more relaxed that, oh, we're all in the same boat. We're all going to do this. We're all going to present our findings. And it also demonstrates to other stakeholders, hey, there's value in collaboration and in doing this stuff together. Because there's a bit of a learning curve in the beginning. There might be a bit of additional time spent on just getting people to collaborate, especially if it is virtual and you have to establish the relationships first. But doing that and building that trust is really important. And part of what's really important there is to give people time and space. So any of this collaboration work needs to be part of their job and not on top. It can't be something they have to do after hours or on their weekends or anything. No. Something else has to give or needs to be taken out, and so that they have time to really dedicate to collaborating on a specific project or challenge, and then rewarding that, incentivizing it. So giving people specific targets. And this could be, we're going to do this challenge or we're going to do this collaboration project for a month. And then, as a group or as pairs, present your findings, and that all of that gets kind of tracked so that people have something to show afterwards and say, yeah, I did this and I completed this, and so did the other people. And having a bit of an incentive to really do it and to embrace it as well.
Yeah, and historically, sort of technology and data and digital, people could sort of stand back and say, well, whoever's got those words in their job title, they can fix this one. But now it's not the case. I mean, we all use technology of varying degrees of sophistication just in our day jobs, and so we're now trying to bring people along the journey to say this is the next stage of this, being data literate or understanding a new platform. But yeah, as you say, it's crucial that it's not, well, keep doing the 40 hours of activity we've already mapped out for you, and here's 10 new hours of data enabled work as well. So really important that it's not layered on top, but it's actually sort of factored into the way their workloads are spread and so on. I suppose a lot of organizations would say, and from the individuals that we talk to as well regularly, there's a huge desire to be better at collaborating, to work beyond those kind of agency borders, as it were. but it's kind of getting moving and getting started, because the end goal is great, but how do you kind of get there? So any sort of tips on how people can really start along this journey of collaboration, working better together, using digital tools and so on, because that can be the daunting kickoff point, and so they're kind of paralyzed by the scale of where they're headed.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say there's a couple of different suggestions I have here. One is to talk to the analysts, the people already working with the data, to see what ideas they would have. What would they do if they had access to all the data to fulfill their dream analysis? So asking them what ideas they've had that have not been possible because of the limitations of what's available, and then seeing which one would actually be one of those easy to achieve first goals, because I think we need some low-hanging fruit and we need some more ambitious targets. And the quick wins, they're really important just for everyone's morale and to show and demonstrate some value. So finding some of those projects and getting people involved in them. And then finding a way, so with technology, to enable that. And it could literally be an environment that's set up just for the purposes of a pilot project, but giving people the chance to really test it out as if it was the real thing, even like if that is required before making a commitment to technology, say, okay, we'll run a project for a pilot phase of 3 months, and we're going to get people from these different departments, and we're just going to test it out. And one thing not to overlook is to do some training and enablement, because there might be new tools involved. There might be people who don't even consider themselves as somebody working with data. And in my view, most people work with data, even if they're not looking at spreadsheets every day. But some of them don't consider themselves data people or doing analysis. So to really support them with the right resources and some training on how do I use these tools, what are some of the basics of analysis. They might not have to do the actual analysis, but so that they understand each other, they have more constructive conversations within this group that's collaborating, and at the same time giving the people who are more on the data side and maybe haven't had as much exposure to the work of some of the people in the departments, giving them a chance to learn about that work as well, so that they can understand why things are done a certain way and how that impacts the data coming down the pipeline.
Yeah, and it's interesting what you say. I mean, in a sense, we're all data people now, right? I mean, it is a ubiquitous presence in everything we do. In some ways, it always has been, but it's just kind of bubbled to the surface, I suppose, in some ways. So it's interesting inflection point, I guess, at this point. So that's it's been great to sort of drill into this and understand how much of this is about enabling people, empowering people, breaking down those sort of barriers and mental blocks around who does what. And then extending that mindset across to other agencies to collaborate more widely. So it's been great to kind of understand how that fits together and how organizations can actually get started and do some really practical examples, use cases, and so on. So thank you so much, Eva, for sharing that with me. We're really looking forward to welcoming Snowflake to the Government Transformation Summit as well, and exploring this idea about cross-government functions in even more detail. I mean, it's hugely important. As you've said, there's so many opportunities around this, but in the meantime, it just remains for me to say thank you for joining us for what's been a really interesting and kind of practical conversation.
Thank you.
So there we have it. Thank you again to Eva for joining me for a fascinating conversation, exploring how government can work better, how government agencies can work better on their data projects, how technology can enable that, but also how the people element has to be unwrapped as well. Really interesting topic and lots to get into there. And we'll also be exploring it more with Snowflake when they host the Cross-Government Functions Roundtable at the upcoming Government Transformation Summit on the 22nd of September at Church House in Westminster. Snowflake are hosting a discussion table there, and we'll be joined by numerous other companies and public sector leaders who will be exploring some of the big topics and challenges that are keeping the public sector on their toes at the moment. If you're interested in attending, then just click the link in the show notes that attach to this episode and you can start your application process. That's about it for now for another episode, but we'll be back soon with another conversation with a public sector changemaker. Until then, goodbye.